Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at this rather interesting curiosity of a Dorito. Not really, it is a flying triangle though. And that is the Avro Vulcan, one of the famous V-series bombers from the United Kingdom. Kind of a Cold War classic, to say the least. And the good folks over at Just Flight have given us an opportunity to check this one out for ourselves. Now, one thing I want to start by saying here is I am by no means an expert on this plane. It's the classic, I know it works for me, and I'm going to share those things with you, as well as some general explanations. And some of the other details, of course, you're welcome to go check out, as with the very, very, very thorough manual that they gave us. So let's get started, shall we? So the first purpose of this first video is basically going to be kind of going over all the who's its and what's its, as well as I kind of getting this thing started. On the next video, we'll be responsible, of course, for getting into the air, as well as doing some navigation. In the final video, we'll be getting back down and landing this and securing it. There are a lot of things going on in this plane. This is 1950s vintage, you got to remember. So there's a lot of things that make this easy as well as hard to fly, and like I said, I like airplanes like this because it's different. Unfortunately for us, there's some simplifications that were done basically to make it a little bit more accessible of an airplane. Now, one thing I want to throw out real quickly here is if you take a look down here on the ground, we've got a little tablet right here. And on this tablet, you've got a bunch of really, really useful things here. One of the things I think is particularly cool, other than we have charts and stuff now, which is really sweet. But under settings, you can actually pick different tools. You can set different themes, you can tell the clock and all that stuff like that. But you'll notice that there is this lovely aircraft button. And if I push it, it kind of gives us a picture around here. One thing I love about this one is before we get too far, we can actually do things like syncing this. We can have GPS available. I like to have it. You can do realistic steering on the ground. It's kind of up to you. It's very awkward when you do this, by the way. I'll know what I mean. You can do automatic shoot. You can also do automatic electronic systems, electrical systems, which, as you'll see how complicated they are in a minute, you'll have a brand new appreciation for those as well. You'll see that. I like it like this. Again, do what works for you, and I can't say that enough. Next page, you can have a bunch of fun little tools here that you can actually pick different things. For example, if I want the TFR dome, maybe I want some of the electromagnetic countermeasures, and we have different engine types, and all that stuff is available. We can even do an auto throttle if we want. Personally, I never mess with this. I haven't really needed to. It's a pretty simple plane once you get it going, so I don't worry about things like that. Next page, of course, is going to give us our fuel. A couple different ways to do it. We can come up here. We can also do it. One thing that I'm really, really impressed with here is they actually have a separate fuel component for our APU, which is very interesting because you'll chew through the power on that thing real fast. You'll know what I mean. We have access to all the radios. This is actually very useful to us because it saves us a lot of going back and forth. You'll see what I mean when we show you. And of course, we have the autopilot, which is actually built into its own page here. I actually recommend using this more than the buttons behind me. I've noticed a lot of bugs with the buttons behind me. Things behaving, things not behaving, things popping on, things popping off. You know, there's a new version of Flight Sim, and it breaks everything. I like to do autopilot from here, but I will show you in the other video how you can do it from the other side. Lastly, we have a couple different buttons down here. We can actually get this thing ready to take off now, which I think is awesome if we want to go through everything we're going to have to go through. Believe me, there's a lot. And of course, we have a couple different options here. Ready to start, cold and dark, which is what we're doing here, sitting on the ground. Lastly, we have a couple different options for different stuff going on. We can close the bomb bay doors. We have chocks, covers, things like that. Obviously, we're going to want to get rid of those, and we're going to want the palos here. This is our air cart start. It's very, very easy to start this plane. I'll show you one really, really fun way to do it. And we'll also take a look at the more traditional way to do it as well. And again, this is going to help us out. It takes a long time for this thing to get plugged in, so kind of keep that in mind. With this all set, I'm going to go ahead and close these. It's not going to let me close them, and the reason being, of course, is I've got no electrical power and I've got no hydraulic power, which means we're not closing the bomb bay doors. So let's go ahead and go through the motions here. Keep in mind here is this is what works for me. What works for you is going to be different. What the book's going to say is also going to be different. But the key thing here is we get ourselves a good, well-started airplane. So the first thing we want to do is, just like every airplane, is that we're going to start on the left and kind of make our way around. Here's our engine start panel right here. Here's our communications channels. You can see the presets are not terribly helpful. Don't worry about that. We'll show you how to play with that a little later on. We can actually come up here and change the channels and things like that. It's a little awkward, and here's where you're going to set your communications frequencies and some of that stuff. A lot of this we're actually going to do out back, but they do give you a couple little handy places. For example, if I wanted to go to my good friend, actually we get some power to this thing before we can do that, so I'm not even going to worry about that yet. You have your audio panel. Coming forward to that, you have all your kind of your TFR, which is basically going to be a radar altimeter, all setting here. You've got a bunch of these little switches here. These made me crazy for a very long time until I realized it's a relatively simple process. This is basically all your artificial stability and stuff like that. Your bomb bay controls are sitting there waiting for you. And of course, the first button we actually push. Nice, that works great. So now we have some oxygen flowing to our mass here, and that's pretty cool. Swinging over to the middle page, we're going to leave everything kind of alone for now. We're going to come back to a lot of this. We're going to come back to all these in a minute. We have our fuel gauges, our little GPS units just sort of chilling there. But the one thing we do want to do, though, is pull this little handle right here. And when you do that, it actually pulls out the center console, which looks like this kind of like rusty, eaten up, nasty piece of machinery here. But it's actually very useful. And you can actually see all of our different fuel pumps here, as well as taking a look at some of the different components that we have, our cross feeds, stuff like that. You also have the automatic pilot, which, like I said, it's a little picky, and you'll know what I mean when we take a look at that. One thing I do want to confirm while I'm here, though, especially if you're doing state saving, double check to make sure your jet pipe tape limiter is set correctly and your RPM limiter is set correctly. This is going to stop you from overspeeding your engines. Kind of an interesting problem, but it's classic. I love how they give you this huge button here. Doesn't do anything, so relax. Swinging over to this side, our co-pilot here, we're going to go turn on his air too. He's not going to mind that too much. And then one switch we're going to hit while we're over here, as weird as it sounds, is going to be the pressurization switch. And we're going to take that and we're going to slam it into the cruise position. I like how it's got a little emergency kind of piece here. The other thing they tell you to do is jam the temperature to cool, but with the system off, it's not really going to do anything. Of course, we have all of our bleed switches. We're going to leave those all off unless we want to keep ourselves warm. One thing I do like is the external light switch. Look at how chunky that switch is. Man, that's awesome. And of course, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to flip on the nav light. And keep in mind, we're going to have no lights yet. This bit right here, this is going to be all about in-flight refueling. We're not going to worry about that too much today. And of course, you've got the anti-ice stuff. So we're pretty much ready to rock with one little tiny exception. And that's this little thing right here. It's our seat pins. And we're just going to make a little stack of those. So if we need to get out of this plane in a hurry, we have a system for that. So now it's time to go run out back and get our electrical system set up. And there's a lot of different ways to do that too. One thing you'll notice is these two little screws. If you click this one right here, it's actually going to take you right to the electrical panel. I'm kind of sad I don't get everything back here. Like, I get it, but like, I kind of want it, you know what I mean? Kind of a thing like that. So when we look at this, we immediately go, panic. Don't panic. It's not as scary as it looks. Basically, you have 4 different pages here. The first one, of course, is your APU. That's all the fun stuff up here. We have our transformers. So we have several different, you can see we have 4 different alternators here, transformers. Over here, we have all of our generator work down here for individual engines. And kind of we have the bus. One thing that makes this a little bit weird and a little complicated is synchronization of electrical supply is done manually, which is a little different. I actually kind of like that. It's very old-fashioned, and I don't hate that at all. Now, one thing I am going to do, though, while I'm here, is you have this lovely non-essential supplies trip. You're going to hit this thing about 50 times by accident. It's okay. You're going to do it. So I'm going to come here. I'm just going to trip it. And the reason I want to trip it is because we don't want to put any excess load on anything, as you'll see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my battery isolation switch. I'm going to click that one on. You're going to get a bunch of angry warnings. Your battery's going to start chewing down. And we're going to immediately get our APU rocking here. So I'm going to open this sucker right here. This is also going to open a little valve. We're going to slam open the master switch. And again, it's going to get itself all nice and set up. We see we have plenty of fuel on board this one. I'm going to leave all these other switches off. But I am going to come up here where it says start. I'm going to click that button. And what's going to happen is this little orange light's going to come on. Temperature is going to come up. And of course, the PSI is going to spike too. And this is good because we're going to need this in order to get it going in a little while. So that's pretty darn good so far. So one of the weird things with this APU that I find a little different, AAPP, A squared, P squared, is the fact that once you enable it, you have to actually connect it with a solenoid to the bus, and it's a little different. So what I'm going to do is make my way over to the AAPP switch and click, and you can see here it's gone ahead and powered the bus. Our bus right now is running at about 115 volts here. You can see my bus bar voltage is squat. Don't worry about that too much. So what I'm going to do now is get 2 of the inverters going. We only need these 2. I'm just going to pop these 2 on. Click, click. That's going to help us out, and of course, it's going to make that a little bit easier for us. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reset as well as trip non-essential supply. So again, it should make a sound because I already tripped it. Slam that down, let go, and now what you're going to see is this light will start flashing. That's good news. That means you did it right. And now you can also see that a couple of our different switches and stuff kind of fired over here. Again, we're not going to fire those other ones. It's just a lot of electrical load on the plane right now. So we're pretty much good as far as out back goes. So I'm going to come swing back up front real quickly. We should have a couple different warning lights. We should have the main warning light. Doesn't surprise me. We should have the alternator fail light. Does not surprise me as well. We're getting a warning about the bomb bay doors. That makes sense because we did not close them. We have no hydraulic pressure. So that's not going to go so well for us. So one thing I am going to do, speaking of hydraulic pressure, I'm going to set my parking brake. I'll make sure that's ready to go. And now we're going to do some fuel work now. Now there's a lot of different options we have for the fuel controls. The key thing is it makes our lives a little bit simpler is all the really, really important ones are all kind of concentrated in the middle. Things we need to worry about. And we also have a center of gravity concern here. And they actually have this little center of gravity chart here. And you can see we're very nose heavy. It's not going to cause us any issues. Don't worry about it. If we had less fuel for takeoff, that of course would be different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I like all these switches on. So I'm just going to kind of work my way through. If you're wondering what these black push switches are for, these are for monitoring fuel flow. You can actually press that button and read off of this instrument here what the actual fuel flow is going to be, which is kind of handy. You also notice we have some switches here for some more fuel pumps. we don't have any Bombay switch fuel tanks. You can't equip those if you choose to do so. I don't, so I'm not going to stress about it too much. One thing I want to do is just confirm the alternator light fail is still blinking. That's what I want to see. I know that sounds weird, but it actually means everything's going okay so far. Next one I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of float over here real fast. I'm just going to confirm, of course, it was very cold. You can come up here, you can actually hit the switch. And what that will do is give us a little bit of bleed air for the cabin to help kind of warm us up or cool us off. But for now, I'm going to leave that in the shut position because I'm not too worried about it, kind of a thing like that. Everything's looking good. So next what we're going to do is we're going to float under here, and you have all of your low pressure fuel cocks here. So we're just going to hit each one of those like that. Go flip all those, and now we're going to go ahead and transfer to the high pressure ones. And this is kind of neat. So to set these, you just click right here on the throttle, and what that will do is open up the high pressure. Now this is going to sound weird, but to start this engine, we're actually going to crack it. That feels weird. Really weird. So I'm going to come float over here now, and I'm going to take a look at my starting panel. And we've already got everything plugged in. So you have a couple different switches. You have normal versus rapid start. I love the rapid start button. To do that, you're just going to turn everything on, hit that switch, push that button, and it will start all of your engines instantly. It's like the most satisfying thing you've ever heard before. But I'm going to leave it on normal right now. Now, everything so far has been okay. The key thing you need to watch out for is if this little switch didn't pop open, that usually means you accidentally popped one of the breakers in the back, and basically you've lost your non-essential trip. If this is open, that's a great sign, because now we're ready to get started. Starting this thing, as long as you've got pressure, is simple. You simply just go ahead and click on the button that you want to start, and it will start that particular engine. If for a particular reason it does not light up, you have a 99% chance you accidentally disengage the parking brake, in which case you've lost the palosts. So unfortunately, that means that we no longer have the high pressure air that'll start our engines. That's lucky for us, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a high pressure start. Now, if you have sensitive ears, you might want to stick your fingers in them real quick, because this is kind of loud when you push this button. Off it goes. I told you that was loud. You thought I was like just being sarcastic. No, I was being very serious. But as you can see, if we were doing a conventional start and we still had the palost connected to us, we basically would have done one engine at a time. Push the button, wait for it to come up. Push the button, wait for it to come up. Push the button, wait for it to come up. Push the button, wait for it to come up. But I wanted to get this thing rolling. So just like that, I've got everything fired up and ready to rock. So we're going to let those engines stabilize. These are 1950s engines after all. One thing we want to just keep an eye on real quick as this thing's boosting. As you can see, we've already used 3 pounds of fuel, and our fuel consumption is slowly rising here. A couple other things you're going to notice. We still have some angry lights here. It's basically because our electrical systems are not set up yet. So I'm going to jump back to the back here. And now we're going to get ready to set up our electrical systems. So of course, what we can do here is we notice we're still on the AAPP here. This is what's providing all of our electrical power. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable my individual generators on board here. Now, switching all the generators on, that doesn't do anything for me. We're still actually running off of the AAPP here. You can actually see this little line connected to our main bus. That doesn't work. Now, you're sitting there going, well, what if I come over here and press the isolate button? That's not going to do anything. What if I press the reset button? That's not going to do anything. What we have to do is get the AAPP off. And the easiest way to do it, see where it says extra supplies trip? You have a button, you just push it, and that will pop the extra supplies off. So now the AAPP is actually isolated right now. So we can just come over here. That's it. AAPP is done. So what I'm going to do now is swing over here. I'm going to go get our 2 transformers set up. Remember, we forgot to set those. I'm surprised the engine just died a little. One thing I like is there's actually a rectifier system off of these two, so you can see my battery voltage actually came up. If you need to put on the tea kettle, you've got switches for that down here as well. Now, one thing you're probably observing is the fact that we actually have only one motor right now, one jet engine powering our entire bus. And you're sitting here going, well, what about these other guys? They're just sitting there dangling their little needles here. I want to run off more than one generator in case I lose one. Well, the good news is the system is designed to be able to catch it. So if I lose this system, we're going to have to go ahead and reset it and then quickly get another one. But the way we can actually avoid that is if we come up to the top, you'll notice this little switch that says alternators. If I switch this on, you will notice it's got a button in the middle that says synchronize. The interesting problem we have here is we have the bus, basically a frequency of 400 hertz, and then we have the generator. We have to get these two in phase with each other to actually engage them. But the nice thing is we don't have to tweak the little screw or anything like that as we used to have to do in the old days. So all I have to do is come up here and press this button. And what you'll see now is we've synchronized generator 1 with our main bus. So now if I wanted to continue that process, which would be a little weird, I don't know why they'd run all four at the same time on the same bus. Seems dangerous to me. But what we can do now is we can actually synchronize the other ones as well. And you can now see that all of my generators are now providing power to the bus. And of course, if we wanted to, we could come over here and isolate, and that'll pop something off the bus for us, even though the alternator generator itself is still doing some work here. Pressing reset doesn't do anything. If you actually want to use this one and put it back onto the main bus, we'd have to actually come back to alternator number 2 and then resynchronize it to lock onto the rest of the bus itself. So now that those components are all done, it's always a good idea to double check to make sure you didn't trip that for like the 30th time. Trust me, you'll do it about 30 times. And now we can float up front. Now, a lot of things are going to start working now. One thing we need to start thinking about, of course, is our instrumentation. We have ourselves our lights. We have all that kind of good stuff over here. Our radar altimeter. I usually leave this off until we get a little bit higher because it causes shenanigans. Trust me on that one. But the big thing we have to solve here is our main warning lights. And we have 2 of them right now, just kind of screaming at us to let us know something's not right. What's not right? Aha! Track the orange lights and see where they go. So this down here, of course, is our automatic systems to basically dampen things. You've got automatic trim in here, and you've got a couple reset buttons. So I like this little game that you have to play with this one. I don't know, it's just something very amusing about the whole process here. But you'll notice, if I press one of these buttons, it lights up. The other thing you'll observe is if I press one of these buttons, the light goes back out. The other thing you'll observe is along the left-hand side here, you will see all of our different controls. We have our ailerons, we have our rudders, of course, we have our elevators, which in this one's a little more complicated. And by pressing these buttons, what will happen is each one of your little lights will start blinking themselves out of turn as each one of those systems enables itself. And you can actually see very clearly that all of our stability is in place, all of our automatic trim is in place, and all of our artificial feel systems are in place. Now, after I do all that, I like to come over here and click that switch on just to stop myself from accidentally. And what I'm going to do too while I'm over here is I might as well flip on our handy dandy little radar altimeter. We're not really ready to use that yet, but everything else is looking pretty good for it. Floating down here, I've got some green lights floating up to the center. You'll notice all of the angry lights are finally off, and we're actually ready to get this thing rolling. Whoa, man, that was a process. That was a process and a half. This is a good time, of course, to get all your communication frequencies and your transponder and stuff set up. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the way they did this is they kept it kind of simple. Is you only have a couple different frequencies at our disposal, which is kind of a shame. But if you notice, by clicking these, it actually changes the frequencies themselves. So for example, let's say I wanted to go to a channel 1. Let's say I want to make this 127. We'll do 120. It's very difficult to read these. 125 point, I don't know. Keep it nice and simple here. You'll notice it won't let you change it because this system is overriding your setting. Isn't that fun when it does that kind of a thing? You also notice if I try to crank these, they will work now because we do have electricity flowing to them. So for example, if I want to go to Hartford VOR, I could actually come in here and dial that in directly, making it a little bit easier for me to do. If I switch this to G, I think that's gonna, nope, G's of course gonna be 121.50. Again, part of the fun of flying this airplane is learning all the little, how am I gonna get around that kind of thing? Other than the fact they've got all like the presets and stuff, all kind of like laid around the bottom. One last thing I'm gonna do while I'm over here, by the way, is I'm gonna go ahead and shut off that system there. It's no longer required, and it's also a good idea to go ahead and get our bleeds set up so we can start getting some atmosphere inside this whip. Sounds good to me. Pop those open. We're going to flip this to the automatic position. We're going to start pressurizing, and it's going to get a little bit more comfortable inside here, and everything's going to be going pretty well. Man, what a process. Last thing I would go double check is to make sure altimeters are going to be set correctly. Looks pretty good on this side. You're looking at this thing saying it's a directional gyro. It's not a directional gyro. This is our choice. This is basically our OBS. This is our CDI all in one instrument. It's pretty complicated. One thing we can do though is we can wind up the 8-day clock a little bit so that the clock doesn't stop on us and time freezes as well. So as you can see, a lot to do in this airplane to kind of get it going, but it's really not terrible as far as the individual controls goes. The big thing is you just need electrical power, you need a pressure source. Speaking of pressure sources, we've already eliminated the pressure source we no longer require there. And you just have to make sure you go through it step by step. There's a full detailed checklist, which makes this relatively easy to do. So now it's just a matter of getting this huge plane rolling for the takeoff position. So I'm going to go ahead and release the parking brake and go ahead and give it a little bit of power. Remember, 1950 sec, it's not going to be the fastest. And we're rolling. So one really awkward thing with this aircraft is on the ground, it is very difficult to work the nose wheel. You'll know what I mean the first 5 times you tried it. I think one of the things that the designers did when they originally put this together was basically do it in such a way that, when you're changing speeds or whatever it is kind of thing, they want to simulate this to be a heavy bomber, but they're trying to almost take Flight Simulator 10 kind of physics and just make them work in Microsoft Flight Simulator rather than do native. It works. It's just different. And now you'll know exactly what I mean once you start playing around with this. Taxiing otherwise, completely conventional. Just remember you're pretty high up off the ground in this plane. This is not a normal plane by any means as far as simple. Again, we're a gigantic Dorito, which I like to call it. And I know that'll offend many people out there. But come on. I mean, like, if I could paint this thing orange, I would. The one disappointing thing we have with this airplane, of course, is the fact we can't paint in anti-flash white. I'm sure there's a livery for it, but I have not located it yet. So hopefully you found this video interesting. Our next video, of course, we're going to be dealing with getting this thing into the air, getting it to altitude, and then handling the navigational side of it, which is, to say it's involved is a little weird. You'll know exactly what I mean when we do it. Enjoy.